So hello and welcome to today's video. So Rockstar Games, we know them as being behind some of our favourite games of all time, Grand Theft Auto, Bully, Red Dead, or more better known recently as being some money hungry. Now in the first episode of Rockstar Retrospectives we took a look at the worst Rockstar game ever made, which was a series adaptation of sorts of the Austin Powers franchise, released on the Game Boy Color. It was absolute garbage in every single way of the word and had barely any ties to the Austin Powers movie franchise at all outside the sprites. But today we're doing a complete 180. Rather than take a look at a game adaptation attempt at a popular movie, we're instead looking at a time where Rockstar Games themselves made a movie. No, I'm not talking the GTA San Andreas introduction mini-movie, I'm talking a real one. And no, I'm not talking about the one that was published on the BBC 5 years ago, that Rockstar themselves absolutely hated because they even said, "What is this random made up bollocks?" No, I'm talking something completely different. The film Rockstar made was called The Football Factory, released only in the United Kingdom I believe, and was an adaptation of the book of the same name by the author John King instead. And this was a collaboration effort with Vertigo Films. Now we know Rockstar Games have paid homage to many films in the past, like Scarface and Grand Theft Auto Vice City, The Warriors, which was a full-on adaptation of the movie, so we know the developers have some love for classic films. And Rockstar's contributions to the movie are listed on the introduction credits and on the back of the DVD cover. Now one notable thing to note is one of the leading cast members of the film is none other than Danny Dyer, who some of you Brits watching may know him best as Mick Carter from the BBC soap opera EastEnders, or calling former British Prime Minister David Cameron a twat. Or more likely, if you're a Rockstar Games fan, you'll know him best as Kent Paul from GTA Vice City and GTA San Andreas. But it's safe to say it looks like Danny Dyer and Rockstar Games are on good terms with each other, seeing as they have worked on multiple projects. Now other leading cast members in the film are Frank Harper, Neil Maskell, Cara Toynton and Jamie Foreman. It's also worth noting that Cara and Jamie were also on EastEnders, who was Tommy's grandfather coping with the death of his friend Albert. And all of these plots have some really nice and natural links to each other. For example, Tommy's subconscious keeps on questioning him about his own life, while at the same time Tommy's actively avoiding the Millwall firm because he's responsible for assaulting the then unknown to him leader of the firm after meeting girls at a nightclub, which isn't really helped by Billy Bright's love for madness and losing grip on his own life, getting into a fight at a children's football match with Fred, who is leader of the Millwall firm. Bill's grief-related side plot doesn't tie in as strongly to the main plot, but there are some nice scenes where Tommy and Bill are shown to actually really be concerned for each other, with Bill being concerned for Tommy and him hanging around Billy, while Tommy is concerned for his grandfather who's going through some rough death-related grief. It all does feel natural and doesn't feel too forced. Also, to slightly cut away, there's actually one scene which I can absolutely tell Rockstar had a say in, and that's this one, where GTA Vice City makes a full-on cameo appearance. Now one of the recurring themes in the film is Tommy having nightmares of him being beaten up in an alleyway and a mysterious dead boy keeps on speaking to him. And this is a fantastic representation of Tommy knowing his life is destructive. If he carries on this way of life, he will meet this fate. And the film has a strong sense of tribalism and pride in the form of Billy Bright, whose entire character arc revolves around him being this feared, highly respected individual, lest you want to get your head kicked in by him and his crew. Now the rest of the firm don't really have too much of an impact on the movie all too much. For example Rod, who's Tommy's best pal. I'd say his story is pretty dull, and it's just him meeting a girl and drifting away from the firm life. He's a very forgettable character in my opinion. Two characters who I did like, but they got some very short screen time, were Raph and Zebedee. Two thieves whose plot revolves around, well, theft and pissing off the wrong people. All of it is very, very minor. And I'd say the film mostly focuses on Tommy, Billy and Tommy's grandfather in that order more than anybody else. I must say though that the character of the nameless cabbie is still relevant today. He's a very, very minor character, he only appears in about 3 scenes. But every scene he's in, he's always going on about something racist, like how immigrants ruin the UK, he doesn't like black people and so on. Something you would usually expect to see from a Twitter account with no profile picture, 6 numbers in their name and joined about 3 weeks ago replying to a BBC tweet. Now, as expected, football itself doesn't actually feature in the film too much. Instead, it relies more on showcasing the dark underbelly of football firms, loyalty, male bonding and stuff like that. And because of that, the roles of women, children and family life are incredibly minor, and only feature for a very tiny fraction in the film, instead opting for a more stronger focus on the men of the group and their own stories. Now the camera work in the Football Factory tends to go for a more handheld approach mostly. For example, during the fight scenes the camera does move rather ecstatically, moving from person to person, quick zoom ins, etc. And to me it does feel a bit too strong in that way, but I assume they were trying to go for quick action so they can show off as much of fights as they really can. Now speaking of fighting, some of it was really well done and quite realistic to real life football riots I've seen online. But some parts of it were laughably bad. Like for example, in one of the intros, Tommy does end up punching a news reporter, or a lad gets smacked in the head with a plank of wood. it's not really too convincing. And another weird thing is, some scenes do look good, where someone gets smacked up, but then it does this weird freeze frame thing before it jumps to a sudden cut. Or something like this.
I see children in this court with more common sense than you.
What'd you say?
Don't you dare answer me with that insolent tongue of yours, you fat fucking slob!
And I gotta say, for a crime drama, it's hilariously out of place. I can't tell if this was done for comedic effect or not, but there were other moments in the film which I did find hilarious. Like, after Billy finds out who robbed him, there's a sudden scene where the two lads are sort of basically human dartboards for Billy's children, who then proceed to kick them in the bollocks for nicking their PlayStation. Now, as said, I'm not too heavy into movies, but I will say there was one cliche moment that stuck out like a sore thumb. And it's a bit with a plot with Tommy's grandfather Bill. Now, they're both old men, they're both World War II veterans, and their entire subplot of the movie is them moving to Australia to live out the remaining years. But, to be honest, it was kind of expected that on the day they were going to move out of England, Bill is calling Albert from the front door, only to reveal that Albert passed away during his sleep. Now, as I said, this was pretty expected, to be honest. I've always noticed that any scene involving an elderly person and somebody calling them from a hallway off screen usually means said elderly person has died. I've noticed that far too much in TV, films, games, whatever. It's just too predictable at this point. Now, the film also loves to make use of sudden cuts, usually just after building up to a fight or so, before skipping that and just jumping straight to the effects at the end. For example, when the firm are on their way to Liverpool to watch Chelsea at Anfield, they come across some Stoke City fans, and they plan to actually jump them. It builds up to the firm about to jump them, but then suddenly cuts to them getting arrested. No fighting is shown, just that. Now, for the settings, I have to say that as a Brit myself, it's incredibly authentic, yet also incredibly outdated at the same time. Like, on the one hand, the scenery of the film shows a lot more of the run-down and rougher areas. Some are dirty, they're not pleasing to the eyes, which is very authentic to the stereotypical council estate areas, where you're more likely to get stabbed or mugged if you're out on your own at night. The skies are dull, they're colourless, they're overcast, it's all very British. Yet on the other side, it's clear the film was set quite a long time ago. You rarely see chavs dressed like this anymore. You might meet the occasional 30-something Bulldozer hassling you for 50p in town, plus chavs have sort of devolved into roadmen, or evolved, I don't fucking know. Also, smoking in pubs and bars hasn't been a thing here for about 15 years, I think it is. And of course, the phones. No iPhones, no Androids, just Nokia bricks basically. Now, one thing I did notice in the film, there's always a bit of inner monologue coming from Tommy, which if you've seen stuff like The Inbetweeners or Peep Show, you'll be familiar with. Actually, one of the moments did feel like it was straight out of Peep Show, if I'm being honest.
What do you do then, Thomas?
Thomas? I kick people's fucking heads in for a laugh, and you should know, Div, you read the charges out.
Now, the film's soundtrack goes for a mostly British kind of setup, with songs like Ever Fallen in Love by Buzzcocks, Fit But You Know It by The Streets, which coincidentally was also in FIFA 2005, and other classic songs like Going Underground by The Jam. Speaking of that, I actually want to point something out, because in the film's soundtrack, Force or Breakout by Sham 69 is in the movie, and that was in Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. Coincidentally, Ever Fallen in Love was also covered in Tony Hawk's American Wasteland, and I also did actually play FIFA 2005 when I was younger, so the soundtrack was kind of nostalgic for me in that way. I mean, okay, Football Factory did come out way before American Wasteland, but this is my first time watching, so yeah. I also gave the entire soundtrack a listen to on Spotify, as I love mostly British rock kind of music, and that's one of my personal favourite genres, so I'd say the soundtrack's pretty great. Now, when it comes to the film's ending, I felt it was really abrupt and rushed. I found it odd how the film sort of ended with Zeb getting shot in the head in front of Tommy. I guess it was fulfilling Tommy's recurring nightmare of being battered, and Zeb being the dead boy speaking to him. But there's zero payoff to this. It just jumps straight to the credits as a quick epilogue of all the characters. All of that was rushed. There's no showing the film's reaction to Zeb's murder, or Billy being sent to jail, or Bill moving to Australia. It's just shown in generic card film. Wait, my mistake, Billy was shown to get sent down, but as said, there's no reaction to the firm or anything like that. Also, something about Bill is, in his last scene he was rushed to hospital after collapsing in the street, and his last scene was him in hospital, and he's never seen again in the film, but then in the credits it just says, he now lives in Australia. Also, nothing is ever really mentioned about what happened to the drug dealer who killed Zeb, what happened to Fred, the leader of the Millwall firm. The ending's just rushed, and it feels quite bad in my opinion because of it. In some ways, I really do like the ending because it's not a, oh, Tommy's left the firm and he lives happily ever after with a loving girlfriend and well-paying job. No, he's stuck here. He's stuck with the firm and he's carrying on living the same way. It's a depressing reminder that sometimes you're so deep in the lifestyle you can never really leave it. Now, as far as I'm aware, The Football Factory was only really released in the United Kingdom and amassed over £600,000 in box office revenue. It's sometimes shown on TV, but online apparently it's not on British Netflix. But from what I've looked up, it might have been on Sweden and Norway's Netflix at one point, but anyway. Weird thing is, this film adaptation of a book actually became its own documentary called The Real Football Factories, also hosted by Danny Dyer, where he visits the roughest firms there are. But honestly, regardless of my views on the film, I feel this film is for a very, very niche group of people who are into gritty crime dramas, realistic settings, and heavily involved into British football culture. I'd definitely say it's aimed more towards men, and most of these reasons why I think it was a UK only release. I don't think there's too many Americans or Spanish people or Germans or Russians or whatever who'd be too heavily interested in, say British football hooliganism, for example. I'm also really unsure why Rockstar Games of all companies had a helping hand in this production. It's really out of their zone. Like, yeah, people do say Rockstar's stories in their games could be worked into films, but I mean, the clue is in the name, Rockstar Games. I did try looking this up online about why Rockstar was sort of working on The Football Factory, but I really couldn't find anything. Maybe it was in Danny Dyer's contract when they hired him for Vice City? I really don't know. But either way, people do love to compare this movie to other gritty English media like This Is England and Trainspotting. So if you enjoyed This Is England, Trainspotting and all that kind of stuff, you might really like this. Now, I personally did like the film, but as said, it's aimed at a very niche demographic, so I can't recommend it to everyone. But thank you for watching this episode of Rockstar Retrospectives, and have a great day. I'm not sure what my next episode will be on, but I'll try and pick something obscure again. So yeah, thanks for watching and have a great day.